The first step was constructing a huge asteroid-made defense network around the Pharos, with 2 gigantic battleship-sized defense platforms anchored above the poles. And not Oberon-class battleships, but Gloriana size. Then merging together thousands of metallic asteroids for a huge shipyard with 1,000 docks, millions of ice and methane comets brought close to provide fuel for my future fleet, depositing a gigaton of Blackstone and most of the Eldar and Orc ships in my inventory next to the future shipyard, and lastly ordering Forge Retribution to send all the Forge ships here, to begin building a new secret fleet. Made it look like this had been the site of a huge battle. There were 3 Orc battleships, and 100 Orc cruisers, plus Eldar and Dark Eldar battleships, a couple of Grand cruisers with Astral Claws markings, but each ship just empty of crew or Xenos. A week later, the first Forge ships arrived, and Lady Villain stepped away from the Pharos and onto the Lamenter Starfoot above Eliva, escorted by Adriel and Ludvius, plus their Death Watch bodyguards. Lady Ezu stayed beside me, because we wanted a blank child, and that would take more work. Pleasant work. It is amazing to see what a Forge world with 1 million tech priests and 10 million servitors can do, when truly motivated. A dozen projects began at once, from drilling and installing a reality cage inside the burned planet, to examining the Orc and Eldar ships, constructing defenses and shipyards, and converting the Grand Cruisers into new Arch Mechanicus shrines. Over the next month, more Forge ships arrived from nearby Forge worlds, detached as permanent explorer expeditions into the Eastern Fringe, from Antax and Ryza, to Triplex Fallon Metallica, even Kona and Megaia. The asteroid field became a beehive of activity, and the nearest moon was selected as a new Forge world, called Machine Forge after 1,000 proposals were discarded due to religious and historical reasons. This place would be a testbed, with each Forge's tech priests bringing with them a host of different manufacture techniques and secret technologies, in exchange for the access to the caches of STC templates discovered on board the Grand Cruisers, of which the Tau designs were the most valued. The teleport guns of the Orcs and the fragments of a real STC constructor were seen as a holy grail, while Xenoriologist Magi dismantled a couple of Eldar and Dark Eldar ships to study the alien machines for greater knowledge. And then I revealed the final piece, a Warlord Titan from the Heresy era, somewhat damaged but with intact crew inside. The Princip pilot, Dave Ergos, stared around and focused on me and my Space Wolf. "You are Astartes, from the Space Wolves?" the woman asked in a hopeful voice, glad to see someone recognizable. I smiled kindly and offered her my hand. "Not exactly, dear lady. Things have changed a bit in the past 11 millennia. Let's get you some food." "Woof!" Canis exclaimed greedily, as food was his main concern on most days. Playing with human-shaped puppies or making his own wolf-shaped puppies came second. It took a few days to get the woman used to her displaced timeline. In a huge underground cavern dug under Forge Machine, a few Moderati from the Titan's crew were assisted by tech priests as they went over each system, from the volcano cannon to secondary batteries and power systems. "I suppose I should return to Gantz and serve in the Legio Titanica again," Lady Day mused out loud, watching the tech priests cover her Titan, named Pride of Kona, with logic canticles and purity service protocols, involving scented incense and lots of oil. I sighed inward. "I have a better proposal, Lady Day. I aim to create a new Titan Legion here, formed from blank princeps. Just like the Lamenters and the Blood Angels will become full blank chapters in time. You have experienced yourself the horror of fallen crew, turning their Titans against humanity." The Princip glanced to my left side, where Inquisitor Azu was quietly conversing with a group of tech priests called the Crucible Resolviate that she had called here personally. "And that involves turning me into your concubine?" The woman guessed and grimaced in displeasure. "Well, that option was out then." "Not at all. It would involve marriage and many children. I can only pilot knights, but I am also a blank. And there are few people in the galaxy that can offer you a loving family and safety for your children. Well, until fighting starts at least." I proposed in a soft voice and squeezed her hand a little. "Let me think about it, Lord Lancefire." The Titan Princip whispered and squeezed my hand a little in response. Oh well, it wasn't any rush anyway. And if she refused, I had control bracelets anyway. I couldn't take no for an answer. In a couple of decades, This forge world will begin manufacturing new titans, even better than your relic. I have sent out calls to 30 forges, and a dozen have already arrived. They will bring a female princeps each, to serve as the initial force that will defend Forge Machine. I explained in a gentle voice, and left out the unspoken part. And serve as concubines too, as their scout titans were mere tokens of participation. No fabricator could send a big emperor or warlord titan out in the fringe, even for all the resources I could provide. But a scout titan to form the base of a new titan legion, and then being given a warlord titan in exchange? That was possible. Of course, getting my own candidate approved as a fabricator for the leadership of Forge Machine wouldn't be easy either. And sadly, Felicia was not millennia old and respected by the tech priest community. I had my eyes on someone else though. A certain fabricator locum from Forge Tigress, who was also a woman. Given that Cult Mechonicus was a religion, it wouldn't matter how old and experienced she was. Forge Tigress would never allow her to become the leader. But with a simple sidestep, the Lady Archmagos would be a fabricator general here, and bring me the atomantic technology and experts from her old forge. It took me a month to romance the veteran princeps to my side, as we have just consummated our marriage when Adriel and Lady Hazika arrived, with Decima and Ludvius on their Black Inquisitor ship. I left Day asleep and teleported in front of the new Inquisitor. She was old and scary, but I wasn't afraid. Lady Adriel and Hazika. Well met, I exclaimed in a cheerful voice, then went to kiss my wife and pat Ludvius on his pauldron. Anything to worry? I asked mentally. Nothing you cannot solve, Lord Peth. The veteran Blood Angel replied with a confident tone. So you are the Maverick Road Trader. And whatever other ranks you have acquired, including a Space Marine chapter. Inquisitor Carmelus announced and then examined me with suspicion. I nodded politely and went to kiss Adriel, just to make a point. Welcome back, love. Not now, Peth. The woman muttered a bit embarrassed. Yes, spreading your seed like oats, are you? The stern Inquisitor asked in an angry voice. Is there a point to your question, esteemed Inquisitor? My blank children are immune to the warp, are they not? I asked with fake naivety. I suspect it's more that defense against the warp in your plans, Lord Lancefire. Your Old Trader dynasty has become too strong. Your alliance with so many Forge worlds, the Silent Sisters, and even some Inquisitors, they all point to a greater plan. The old woman whispered in a psychery voice, about as strong as Rose had been when we first met. Beta-level psyker probably. Careful there, my dear. You might be an agent of the throne, but I am actually related to the Emperor, by blood. Via his son, Primarch Sanguinius. My children, they are the Emperor's grandchildren, by blood. I proclaimed in a low voice, using all my focus to remain upright and unbowed. At need, I could take out my bone staff, but I was making a point here. My argument seemed to have an impact, as the Inquisitor stepped back a little and glanced at Ludvius then back at me. So she had learned about the angel, right from an eyewitness. There have been other sons who turned against the Emperor. And only recently a pair of the loyal ones returned to help the Imperium, with your help, correct? Lady Hazika demanded in a sharp tone. I just shrugged and drew Adriel into another kiss. Accuse Lord Peth again, old witch, and I will crush your bones. Perhaps a demon will crawl out. Ludvius growled and hefted his power maul, making it glow blue with energy. The Inquisitor's bodyguard drew ranks, hefting weapons and trying to look menacing. So they vanished in my labyrinth for now, before one of them fired by accident. Lady Hazika is correct, Ludvius. Primarch Sanguinius was killed by Horus, was he not? I said in a peaceful voice, and held my hand towards the stern Inquisitor. The woman touched me cautiously, almost like expecting to get burned at my touch. Immune to warp but not nearly as painful as those Silent Sisters. The Primarchs had plenty of Silent Sisters, and did not use them to protect themselves from chaos. Probably defending the warp gate under the Imperial Palace. Or they simply considered any defense beneath them. Prideful guys, the Primarchs, I declared in a low tone, placing the Inquisitor's hand on my elbow and having her walk beside me while I explored the black ship. I feel like I'm the one being examined for corruption. Lady Hezekiah Carmelus muttered as we passed interrogation cells, and decks of sealed rooms with purity seals on the doors. I just hummed inward, while cataloguing and inventorying everything on the spaceship. So many exotic weapons, assassins and Xenos held in stasis, 1,000 autosavants and astropaths a few decks below, prisoners of 1,000 kinds, from governors to rogue traders and navigators, to simple tech acolytes and imperial guardsmen. Did I steal an Exitus rifle and 100 rounds for it? I deny any such allegations. After a week of examining my new guest, I concluded that Lady Hezekiah would not qualify for into my family. Mostly due to her Puritan philosophy, which fit more into the Sisters of Battle group, using faith and willpower as a source of strength. Sure, those were both immensely powerful tools, but they needed exceptional people to work. Not everyone could have the strength of will to stare a demon prince in the eyes and crush him in a desperate last stand. 1 in a million people, maybe. For the rest of humanity, prayers worked almost like home. As in, very little. Which is why there were spaceships and army regiments actually fighting in the Imperium's wars, and not holy saints all over the place. I found some actual relics to gift her, and a mostly vague story about my abilities and plans. The woman wasn't stupid, but she also had nothing on me, nothing concrete. The Inquisition will still need access to the Pharos, Lord Lancefire. However you managed to transport the planet here, the Catan inside is a dangerous Xeno, and there is much to learn from examining it and its abilities. Inquisitor Carmelus muttered with a sharp and hateful look at Zorhulash. The Catan pleaded silently at me, but I just smiled. I will agree to this, with the caveat that I will screen these Inquisitors. And if they are found wanting, their corpses will be sent to Terra, along with their rosettes. So no demon hosts or other corrupted traitors, nor the many other kind of insane freaks I hear about, massacring Astartes chapters or burning entire imperial planets because their bowels said so. I replied with a gentle voice. The old woman blinked once, before vanishing with a flash of purple fire. Oh well, I guess there won't be too many Inquisitors visiting Forge Machine in the future. Their curiosity will possibly be tempered by the promise of certain death, and the numbers of dead Inquisitors returned to Terra slightly dead had steadily increased over the years, often with proof of their treason attached inside the stasis box. Others had mysteriously vanished or died in various explosions, and only their rosettes were returned. After Lady Hezekiah left, I began searching for a new deployment target, as my lamenters had finally reached 2 companies of Battle Brothers and 2,000 tech marines, not the forging kind, but pilots and field commanders for the Guardian mobile turrets. Would it surprise you to find out the Blood Angels had 40 tech marines in total? I almost felt like slapping their heads around. Perhaps it was time for visit. Then again, Hiveworld Meridian was experiencing earthquakes, which naturally announced a Tyranid fleet approaching. My dear Adria Calistradi was there, purging a gene-stealer cult with their aid of the Death Watch, and even Lord Commissar Kane was there, no doubt cursing his luck while neck-deep in cultists and Gena-stealers. I helped a little, emptying 2 crates of crack grenades to thin out the enemies, and sent a squad of Blood Angels and 2 Silent Sisters to keep Adria a bit safer. She didn't have Kane's luck, after all. Clean out the southern harp spires of orcs, and make sure to secure the manufactorium until my fleet arrives, I whispered in Inquisitor Calistradi's mind. Peth. I should have known it was you, damn situation was so familiar. The woman grumbled as Sister Alia fired her phase plasma fusel into a huge gene-stealer patriarch, ripping off a limb claw, while her sister charged ahead and slashed with a knight-sized power sword, taking off a leg and crippling the beast. Got delayed by some kind of temporal distortion, my love. There are 100,000 bioships heading your way, so you'll need to mobilize every able citizen. Just make sure to place Commissar Kane in command, he has good instincts. I explained in faint amusement, before switching focus to a certain Necron. Dan Wizard was playing puppet master with his captured tech priests, preparing his Blackstone fortress for another shot at the Hadex anomaly. How long till you're ready, Lord Trazin? I asked, curious. Stranger. I almost forgot about you. As for firing the weapon, the Inquisitor wanted the ignition button, so it's up to her. We've been ready for weeks, but she keeps demanding more machine prayers and purity rituals. As if my creations would explode from improper maintenance. Trizin the Infinite complained while his staff discharged a green cloud of energy. Well, I wasn't surprised at the Inquisitor's precaution, as many Mechanicus contraptions did explode or malfunction in horrible ways. Most often when warp fuckery was involved. But that was mainly because the moron tech priests only used a single Geller field instead of 20, even on critical installations or spaceships. Those ruinous powers did enjoy ruining things for humanity. While I was musing for something to trade, Lady Adriel teleported beside me, and went to pet Canis without any fear. The space wolf just snorted and allowed the woman to scratch his magnificent fur, eyes still fixed on the alien creature on the wall. "What are you doing now?" the Inquisitor demanded and walked beside me. "Arranging for the closing of the anomaly. It won't take long," I murmured out loud, while measuring the Ordo Malleus Inquisitor with my mind's eye. Lady Avixia was formidable, even from this distance. Then again, she carried her own father's skull on her shoulder, used as a shoulder-mounted autocannon. This was true dedication and willpower, although she would need a null-bone rod to be safe against the warp. Perhaps a chronoblade. No. She had a real relic polearm anyway. "You need to give the Inquisitor a null wand, Lord Trizin. She hears voices, and that's not a good sign," I told the Necron after observing the damaged Inquisitor whisper to her dead father. "That's actually makes sense. No wonder she was so undecided. Something is inhabiting that skull, perhaps?" Trizin asked while he teleported a null wand to one of his mind-controlled tech priests. I just observed her reaction, as the null wand instantly suppressed the ghost inside the skull. "Inquisitor Danica, is everything all right?" The tech priest underling wondered and drew back. "It's nothing, I just had a revelation." "Very well then. Let's fire your weapon and hope we don't all die gruesomely when it fails." The black-haired woman muttered and took out a hand device with 2 green buttons. "Just make sure you press both of them at once, Inquisitor Danica. We're confident that is the best way to close a warp rift of this size," Trizin proposed with a mechanical voice emitted from the tech priest's voxbox. Clack. The armored woman pressed both buttons and the weapon blurred and split in two, then 2 parallel black beams struck the anomaly. Well, only one was visible. The warp swirled and constricted, then an immense howl emerged from deep inside the vortex, followed by a giant red claw the size of a few stars. But Trizin wasn't a wizard for nothing. Some kind of brilliant green Gauss beam shot from beneath the fortress, flaying the gigantic claw and forcing it to draw back, while the warp contracted more and more until 2 waves splashed into each other, and sent spatial shockwaves for light years, annihilating everything in their path, stars or demon worlds or spaceships. "It worked. The anomaly is gone," Lady Avixia exclaimed in surprise. And then, despite the null wand in her hand, a voice spoke in her mind. "The ruinous powers will never forgive you, Lady Avixia. You're not ready to fight a great demon either, if a mere skull ghost could fool you for this long. And your tech priests are not actually friendly, now that your purpose is over. I advise you to depart hastily, and ask Inquisitor Emmaus for help." "Who is this?" she asked, looking around suspiciously. "I have a puppy. And that's your safe word too, if you keep calm and demand to leave right now," I explained while keeping watch on Trizin, who was obviously considering adding an Inquisitor to his collection. To give her credit, Lady Avixia could be very decisive at need. In a second, the skull was dismounted and shot into melted sludge by her Inferno pistol, before she turned towards the nearest tech priest. "I will leave now, for my service to the Emperor calls me elsewhere. Also, be warned if you try to stop me, for I have a puppy," she proclaimed, sounding fearless. The tech priest in front of her hesitated, before waving a mechadendrite in disgust. "I should have known you were his agent. All this waiting, just to receive the go-ahead to fire when the stranger returned." "Fine. You will arrive on Forge Retribution a minute earlier and forget about us. You hear me, stranger?" Trizin muttered as the Inquisitor vanished from the Blackstone Fortress, to reappear on Forge World Retribution, just beside my knights and their tech priests supervisors. So, Trizin did keep a locator on those knight suits. "You can already start preparing a null-bone one for my agent, Lord Trizin. I shall provide a bloodline flaw in a decade or 2. Now, I want those repair modules, for knights and titans. I asked while another Dark Eldar Archon and his retinue appeared in front of Trizin, only without weapons. Oh? Is this my present? The rulers of a nearly extinct species, who live on pain. The Necron Overlord wondered while examining the new prisoners. Just imagine how many secrets they might know. Secret webways and weapons caches, hidden subdimensions of the Camorra, maybe the construction method for those amazing void mines? I offered with a teasing smile. Trizin nodded, obviously considering my words. Yes, indeed. And in exchange, you only want a copy of their knowledge, in STC format? He asked rhetorically. I smiled inward and did not reply, instead checking on the Necron world being assaulted by Hive Fleet Perseus. To my surprise, those Necrons were still on Bardic, and their tomb ships were fighting a gigantic Eldar fleet instead, while the void was littered with dead bioships. The planet itself was still infested with billions of Tyrannid warforms, battling a Black Catan Shardin armies of Necron warriors, all wearing Tyrannid hides on their backs like capes. Not unexpectedly, an avatar of Cain was leading the Eldar fleet from a large battleship with too many guns, empowering the bright lances to pierce right through the thick black stone armor of the Necron warships. The Necrons had almost 100 ships but were outnumbered 30 to 1, and their weapons seemed to have no effect when striking the Eldar battleship, green beams of death striking a golden aura and vanishing. Damn cheating Eldar god. Well, the Avatar sure chose the perfect time to attack, and I decided to lend a hand, deploying a couple Nova mines in the midst of the Necron escort ships. A minute later, the Necron fleet was faring even worse, reduced to 8 capital ships and their shields weakened a little. I was pretty sure the Avatar would object if I used a Vortex warhead, so I just watched. Well, I could sell tickets to this fight now. Something amazing will take place on Bardic, Lord Trizin. A Catan Shard and an Eldar Avatar, fighting among hordes of Tyrannids. Want to buy a ticket to this once-in-a-lifetime show? I asked in a curious voice. Yes. So it hasn't yet begun? I can prepare then, and you'll get your trade, don't worry stranger. Might need more test subjects to perfect memory downloads on the Dark Eldar. At least a few thousands? The Necron proposed quite shamelessly. Couldn't say no to such a nice robot, could I? Lady Adriel waited patiently beside me as I opened my eyes. Well? She asked curious. It is done. The Hadex anomaly was closed. I replied with a glance at the Catan god. A fine blow against those warpling creatures from the Immaterium, Pef Lancefire. Now you'll have to repeat that, several more times. Zorhulash spoke with a slightly impressed voice. I picked up a null wand from Midair and offered it to Adriel. I think you should stay here, for a few decades. Keep an eye on the new forge and raise a few children. Adriel had a bionic eye, so my joke wasn't all that tactful. This is a Xeno artifact, Pef. My left eye was made by a joke arrow, and it picks up certain Xenos vibes. She explained while twirling the wand in her hand. I just shrugged and hugged her to my side. One day humanity will make even better tech. But it would be a pity to blow up your brains, if you let a demon inside or some mind-controlling Xenos gets hold of you. Your children will be sad to grow up without a mother. She sighed and glanced at the Catan. This creature better cooperate then. I won't waste 2 decades for nothing. I smiled gently and began setting up a holographic screen, matching cogitator components from my inventory. Lady Adriel has level 2 access, Mighty Zorhulash. Lady Ezu and other authorized visitors, level 1. The Catan wasn't a star god for nothing, and he measured my lover with curious eyes. It is a pact then. For my safety, he demanded in a cold voice. I just smiled and flicked a comm cable at his foot's pinky toe, where the connector just merged with his toe, seamlessly. Then I grabbed Canis and the sounding board, and stepped through the Pharos directly on Forge Retribution. No point wasting travel time and fuel to reach my own domains. Fabricator Dominus, you heard the news? I asked the tech priest in a gleeful tone, making him jump in surprise. Lord Pef. You mean about this Inquisitor who appeared out of nowhere? The Magus said and pointed at a holoscreen to show Lady Avixia conducting interrogations on my night pilots. Related to that, this woman has just closed the Hadex anomaly, with the aid of some deviant tech priests from Forge Venatoria. Quite an achievement, wouldn't you say? I explained while bringing out Canis and preparing a few cups of drinks for my guest. Dominus stared at me for a moment, before looking at the screen again. Some kind of reality gauge? But the energy for that? It was way more complicated than that. The energy came from a black stone fortress, my friend. Plus some really deviant procedures. I spoke softly and twisted my labyrinth to bring Avixia in the room. Lady Avixia, meet Canis, my puppy, I announced with a genial smile. The Inquisitor stared at me, and patted her hip where she had the new null wand. This was another teleport, without using the warp, she concluded while examining Canis with a long stare. Woof. Woo. Canis explained logically. Tea, peach juice, recaf? I proposed with a kind smile. Tea will do, Astartes. Lament a chapter? The Inquisitor demanded with a stern voice, and went to pet Canis while examining his shield collar with expert eyes. I poured tea and waited, while discussing with Magus Dominus through our manifold circuits. Much faster exchange of data that way, and more secure. I had lost plenty years and had much to catch up, but Forge Retribution has not been idle. Fabrication lines for the new infantry hellguns, las cannon tarantula turrets and armed sentinels were already operational, while the new forged districts for Guardians and Macarius tanks were almost ready. Nearly 1 billion immigrants have been imported via Antax, mostly servitors and new acolytes. In orbit, there were 6 dockyards now, 4 for escorts and 2 for capital ships, and the Canticle battlecruiser had been already finished upgrading to my specifications. Primarily extra armor, new reactors and better shields. Even better, my mentor explorer Margus Gyron had sent a short message saying entry found, which most likely meant he was inside the Speranza now. Wherever he was not in the Pharos range, which didn't surprise me at all. I am not the usual kind of Astartes, my lady. Must be my rogue trader origin, but I prefer using my brain instead of muscles. For example, I prefer using blank Astartes in my chapter. Pretty much zero chance of falling to chaos and being turned against humanity. Sure, I just copied what the Emperor did with the Silent Sisters, but since it works then it surely means my adoptive grandfather approves. I explained in a polite voice, and sipped some recaf to recharge. Blank Astartes, how does that even? The Inquisitor grumbled inward, and handed me the null wand, but I waved it away. I was a null myself, after all. There is a big difference between blanks and pariahs. The first kind is a mere adaptation, to withstand the energies of the warp, just like dark skin protects someone from the sun or Windows tint to block weapon flares. The second kind, it's more akin to photosynthesis and solar sails. Warp energies are used to provide that person with extra power, besides simple immunity. Power to close the Haddock's anomaly, for example, I continued in a soft voice, and raised an eyebrow knowingly. The Inquisitor nodded in deep thought, now realizing why those heretic tech priests had asked for her scrawny pariah so insistently. This means, we need to grow and protect blanks until they produce more pariahs. Such weapons would, this is huge, Avixia exclaimed in an ecstatic voice. Yes, of course. That it is exactly why the Silent Sisters were banished from Terra, and blanks all over the galaxy hunted down and murdered for being dangerous mutants. Often by your own order, Lady Inquisitor. How many High Lords on Terra are psychers? Who pilots the ships, maintains the Astronomicon, provides empire-wide communication, or hunts down rogue psychers? Aren't the most powerful Inquisitors psychers too? And other secretive groups like the Grey Knights and the Templars _psychologists? I asked rhetorically. The woman froze for a second, before sighing in defeat. You never heard this, fabricator. Sealed by my order, she demanded forcefully and returned the teacup on the tray. Of course, Lady Danica. It will be so, unless Lord Lancefire countermands that order. Magus Dominus answered with a flat voice, and glanced at me for praise. Well, he was loyal so I praised him on the manifold. Come, Lady Avixia. Let's take a walk and visit Forge Retribution, I said peacefully and offered the woman my elbow. That always worked. Canis, wanna come or visit your lady friends? I asked my other friend. Canis just snorted and grinned wolfishly. All right then, go have fun making puppies, horny space wolf. He vanished to reappear in the wolf pen, and proceeded to dominate his new bitches immediately. "That Fenrisian wolf, how is that a puppy?" she asked as we walked around the forge and examined the new fab lines. "Obviously Canis has grown up. I got him as a puppy though," I replied with a wide smile, and produced a data slate with his cute appearance as a wolf puppy. A couple of hours later, we returned to my rooms to eat, and Felicia arrived in a rush to welcome me with kisses and hugs. "Pef, I passed the entrance rites. Next year I will be a full Magus," she explained proudly while sitting in my lap without a care. A flash of jealousy passed over Lady Avixia, making Felicia tilt her head curious. "Don't worry, Lady Inquisitor. I can wait, if you want the first rounds." The bubbly Engineer ratted cheerfully and kissed my angelic cheek, lovingly. That didn't help as much as she expected. What is this exactly, Lord Lancefire?" the black-haired Inquisitor demanded in a stern voice, watching my hands fondle the blonde woman in my lap. "Couldn't help it really, must be a reflex. Blanks cannot be cloned, Lady Avixia. Only made naturally, with deep sessions of hot sweaty bedtime. Or other locations, like a steamy hot shower," I replied very seriously, while Felicia was already breathing heavily and pushing herself harder into my hands. Her eyes glazed over for a few seconds, no doubt envisioning the promised scene. "Perhaps, I can watch. Yes. And I do need a hot shower," Avixia murmured to herself. It didn't take that long until my new lover joined me and Felicia in bed. Didn't plan for a threesome on the first day, but maybe I was that lucky sometimes. "You want me to travel with you to Hive World Meridian?" Avixia asked, looking strangely at me. "Not just for the pleasant company, my dear. There is a cache of demonic artifacts there. And this time, it won't be just the Lamenter fleet. House Lancefire will provide some cruisers and the knights," I explained with a big smile, just as Rose entered my room. Even as a blank, and my lover wearing the nullbone staff, her powers were obvious, as the air shimmered around Rose with a light blue glow. Avixia patted her hip to make sure the null wand was still in place. "Pef, my love. A demon hunter now?" Rose asked with faint merriment. "Lady Avixia was instrumental in closing the anomaly, my dear. She even fired the weapon," I said while offering a hug. Rose smiled a little, while her deck of tarot cards flew out and glowed, before falling on the table in some mysterious reading. "Even so, my naive Pef, your sweet Avixia is only waiting for an opportunity to burn you alive. It's how their kind are trained, or better said, brainwashed." I sighed inward, knowing it was probably true. There's a long list of those who want me dead, but it will never happen. In fact, it only saves me time by exposing the traitors and allowing me to exterminate them easier. I answered in a cheerful voice, then kissed Rose for a long minute. When I returned inside my body, Avixia was staring at me with a doubtful look, possibly reconsidering her life choices. "I do not burn innocent people, no matter what you heard about my order, colleague Inquisitor. And Lord Pef is a blank, so most corruption accusations would be absurd, at least those involving the warp or chaos. There is some doubt on his chapter's approach on the Codex Astartes, plus all the proven heretic use of Zeno's artifacts." Inquisitor Danica replied in a dignified voice. "Proven, you say? A Blackstone fortress is made by Xenos too, with the purpose of fighting against chaos. Now, how should you be sentenced, Inquisitor Danica? Surely if you're not guilty, being submerged in molten brass will not hurt you," I explained with a wide grin. "That would be interesting to watch indeed. I boiled Fulgrim's corpse in molten adamantium, but never an Inquisitor, not yet," Rose commented and weaved a claw made of warpfire around her hand. "That won't be necessary. If Lord Pef did use a Zeno artifact, he must have had a good reason," Lady Avixia muttered as the adamantium floor beneath her feet started melting. Rose cast another deck of tarot cards, while the floor became solid again. A trick of the trade worth remembering, as it did use the environment against someone immune to warp. You could also simply use weapons, which was how most blanks got killed anyway. "See, Pef? Now we're all friends. Next crisis will happen in 7 years, if the nice Inquisitor survives so far," Rose predicted with a warning voice, then continued on the manifold. "This woman is completely deranged. Keep her away from Alivar." I sobbed inward. All my efforts would be wasted on Avixia, if things were this bad. Perhaps it's better if you are given a new quest, Lady Avixia. Travel to the Rock and awaken Primarch Il Johnson. Those silly Dark Angels have forgotten about him and keep him hidden in a stasis crypt, right under their fortress, I murmured in a soft voice, while taking out a few items that will help. A data slate containing the best STC templates I had, another null wand and a blessed auto-simulacra disc, which contained enough alloyable to heal a power armor a few times. Both women exhaled in unison, perhaps at the amazing news. Why her? Rose demanded in a furious tone. Because only Avixia can enter this crypt. She needs a ferryman to help her cross, and those ferrymen only listen to Ordo Malleus, I declared confidently, and then moved the demon hunter aboard the inquisitorial black ship in orbit. Then I sat down and sighed deeply. If my conjecture was correct, the ferrymen Grey Knights would be able to resolve those watchers keeping the Lion in stasis. They were all pariah after all. Dad. We're going to Titan. Too bad it takes 2 years to reach it. Janice sent me as the black ship cruiser began undocking from the Forge Retribution's receiving space station. Be careful there, Janice. Trust no one. I advised my daughter with parental worry. Terra and the solar system were always the most dangerous place to be, even for a navigator. And Titan was the base of the Grey Knights. Then I turned to stare at Rose, watching her get undressed with bemusement. So all that was to get me for yourself, my beloved Rose? But she only laid herself in bed, and beckoned me over. You have to stop doing this, love. If not Avixia, then the next. But you will get excommunicated, and doom your family as well. So far, you got amazingly lucky, but don't chase after more Inquisitors. Even Villain can't do much against the Inquisitor Lords. While joining Rose in bed, I mentally scratched a notch on my bedpole anyway. Having seduced at least one woman Inquisitor from Ordo Malleus, it was time to look for an Ordo Hereticus lover. Banking on my amazing life story, and my rather impressive resume of campaigns and high-profile kills, I would bet a throne at least one heretic hunter would fall for it. Anyway, it seemed Rose was very eager for a new child, which made me just as eager too. I did choose a pleasant type of duty, and I'll never regret it. The blank town has grown into a blank city in my absence, as my children and their children kept increasing our numbers, as did the imported blanks like Jurgen and Sly Marbo and all the others. As for the Katakans, we had 150 regiments now, and their children had also reached recruitment age, at least the first generations. Technical training in the colonies was already the best I could offer, and that reflected back in increased output in new factories, mills and even agriculture. My kingdom had finally achieved resource independence, although we will keep importing advanced machines and immigrants, in exchange for raw or processed materials. If this wasn't a total war economy, things would have been much easier, but war will never end in this universe, not with orcs and tyranids and necrons eager to smash, eat or destroy everything, while Eldar and Chaos plotted the demise of the humanity at every opportunity. However, while things were still bad for the Imperium, in the Ultima Segmentum it was possibly a better state of affairs than anywhere else. Many of the Forge worlds doomed in that other timeline were still here, some battered, some thriving but alive even so. Also, pretty much every demon world I could reach had been burned, as were many Orc, Necron and other Xenos planets. Plus, all the new technologies and the Blackstone and Adamantium provided for the war effort, and a few easy victories over Eldar, Orcs, and Tyrannid hives, and much costlier victories over Necrons and Chaos forces. I was just waiting for Primarch Gilliam to make up his mind and commence his march for Terra. The man had charisma and momentum behind him, something I could never hope to achieve. To put it simply, Robute was the hero of the story and everyone else was his helpful aid. Soon enough, this proved true again as my fleet reached Meridian, and we rapidly began preparing defenses against the Tyrannid Hive fleet. With over 30 billion people, I could demand and obtain 1,000 regiments being raised without any problem, although arming and training them would take time. So I tasked my tech priests, and the local tech priests to convert the criminal underground into tech servitors, and had them assemble hellguns and las cannons and landmines and autocannons by the millions, while my troops and Astartes provided enforcement. It would have worked great, because my plans always work. It was not the first Hive world that I defended after all. But then, the damned Blood Ravens objected, claiming this world was under their protection, and sent a priority communique to the Primarch, and the damn idiot gave them command over the defense. It wasn't enough that this Space Marine chapter had an ungodly large amount of psychers and librarians. No, that I could deal with. Not with the fucking corrupted Azariah Kiras, the cretin wishing for demonhood. So now I had to find a damn Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor, or let this world get munched on by Tyranids. Well, I could also act sneakily, but I was pretty sure this time and place was not right. There were too many eyes watching, and not many friendly ones. At least I had a patsy to send forward and take the blame. Commissar Kane. We meet again, and you look rather healthy now. How has duty been treating you? I asked over a glass of expensive wine. I manage, Lord Lancefire. The armor and sword you gave me saved my life a dozen times, and the bodyguard twice that. Although some of them have died, fighting valiantly for the Emperor. The man muttered, not too pleased. I nodded gallantly, because death was too common in the Imperium. I have another gift for you, esteemed hero of the Imperium. This is a miniaturized warp null rod, disguised as a combat knife. It also cuts, but that's not the point. I explained and offered him a Katakan-style jungle knife, with the handle drilled to allow a null wand to nest inside. The man hesitated, before accepting the gift with a sad face. Protection against the warp is too valuable to refuse, as much as I would like. I am a blank, so I don't have a need for such a trinket. However, I do require a favor, Commissar. Place a call and ask for an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor to be dispatched at once, hopefully on a warpless drive ship, I whispered in fake secrecy. Really no need, inside my quarters, but it made a better impact. I suppose it is within my rights as a Lord Commissar, although I never used the rank. But why me, why not yourself, Lord Lancefire? He asked with visible worry. I just shrugged and emptied my cup. The last time I met a chapter master who fell to chaos, it ended in the Badab War, billions of people died and the chapter was excommunicated and completely exterminated. My chapter, the Lamenters, lost 900 battle brothers fighting the Astral Claws and their allies. We only have 200 Astartes right now. Kane blinked at me, and drank his wine in a single gulp. I shall make the call, Lord Lancefire. And let's pray the Emperor listens too, and sends us someone able to fix this, before the Tyranids arrive. I sighed inward, and poured myself more wine, while mentally placing a vox call to the Governor of Meridian, while Kane walked away at a rapid pace. Governor De Rosa, do you have time for a meeting? I asked while smiling at the holoscreen. Lord Lancefire, in 1 hour, if you're available then. There will be a working dinner, with my closest staff only. The Lady Governor answered, a bit flustered. My face did have that effect on mortals, and I plan to use that. For the benefit of the Imperium and the salvation of the human race, of course. I'll invite Inquisitor Callistrati then. Best if she scans your staff for gene-stealer infiltrators. I explained with a gentle voice. The genome scanning gadget from Lord Trazyn was really useful after all, even if it cost as much to make as a dreadnought suit or Baneblade heavy tank. A single tank would not save a planet from a Genocida cult, but the Invictus Paterno specs could. Sadly, only Forge Masters or Archmagi with great experience could craft them, and not very quickly. Not when it required using thin slivers of enslaver bones and other exotic materials, like psychonerves and neurons and an emanator's force field to scan for special ether and empathic markers. Trazyn was working on a new device, able to detect chaos corruption just like the Necrons could for themselves. Only, doing that with Mechanicus level of technology was not as easy, nor were enslaver bones an item found on markets. After the meal with the governor was over, I stayed for a nice bottle of wine and a relaxing chat in front of fireplace, which even had a gigantic beast fur laid in front of it. Very promising. So why do I get this honor, my lord? I heard that you caught Gregor Vandis, just before he managed to run away with all the stolen riches from my planet. Lady De Rosa murmured with a worried glance towards the Inquisitor. I did, and thus came in conflict with the Blood Ravens, who also claim ownership over some relics, including chaos-tainted artifacts, that had to be destroyed. And my Astartes are all blanks, which means we're immune to corruption, but that's quite the exception among humanity. I also believe that chaos incursions will continue in this sector, and where else would they strike than at the leadership, the noble houses? I asked rhetorically, while the blonde woman paled and gulped some more wine for courage. Our faith in the Emperor will keep us safe, and perhaps your troops, the governor murmured in a hopeful voice. I smiled gently. There is a simpler solution, and quite a pleasant one. I will be available to impregnate most of the noble daughters with blank children, and thus create a ruling class immune to chaos. I commented with a knowing glance towards the welcoming fur. The woman blushed fiercely, and then turned towards the Inquisitor. Is that all right, Lady Calistrati? She asked in a shy voice. We don't have that long, Lord Pef. I already feel the silence in the warp, reducing my abilities and giving me nausea. Perhaps a month, Adria said with a soft voice, and sipped fruit juice instead. I kinda guessed the nausea was not the silence's fault. Here? Elena de Rosa asked while her hands were already unconsciously unbuttoning her uniform. I swiped the fur into my tesseracte and then stole the governor as well. I do believe my bed will be much more appropriate. What do you say, Adria? I don't care, as long as I get a few rounds. The black-haired beauty explained and massaged her breasts teasingly. Well then. Time to do my fucking duty then. And Rose might wanna watch or even join in, which would be great too. Much later, Lady Elena returned to her apartments quite tired, while Adria and Rose stayed in my bed to explore my talents in depth. So why are we here, Pef? Except saving a hive world from tyrannids? My stern lover asked while massaging my glands. I need Blood Raven's genocide, to obtain psycholibrarians for my chapter. I am quite certain that it's the genocide itself that turns feral boys into gamma-level psychers. I explained with a wry voice, and relaxed under her pleasant ministrations. Rose exchanged a look with Adria, and drew closer, pressing her breasts in my face while Adria took over the massage. Tell me more, she demanded in a throaty voice. Damn the Inquisition. Such torture was impossible to resist. They listened to my plan, and fine-tuned it to be legal and less risky. You better hope the Ordo Hereticus sends a woman, and one, very amenable to your charms, my love. This plan of yours might turn into a disaster otherwise. Rose grumbled as she rested on my chest. I hoped so as well, counting on my knowledge of the events around Aurelia and the Blood Ravens. It was always possible that things will turn out different, especially with the Eldar Farseer Idrinel involved. This Farseer will join my collection when I found her, as she was surely around somewhere, using the turmoil on Meridian to draw the Hive fleet towards the Imperium. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena kept inviting noble daughters to visit her, and then they got simply ordered by an Inquisitor to bear my children and promote them inside their houses, the blanks most of all. We managed to score about 50 of them, before another Navy battlecruiser arrived in the system, carrying Inquisitor Adrastia and her retinue of witch hunters and interrogators. Strangely, there was a locked adamantium vault deep inside this spaceship, holding a young woman in a stasis pod, and the stasis pod bound with 100 purity seals and phasine chains. A mystery for another day. Right now, Commissar Kane was tasked with receiving and offering his suspicions, backed by a couple of Blood Raven's Marines sharing his accusation. Return to your duties, Commissar. I shall interrogate these witnesses myself. The Inquisitor demanded with a deep frown, and locked her cold blue eyes on Captain Angelo's. I just laid in bed, while sweet Elena was riding me in glorious ecstasy. The blonde governor was not the first nor the last noble woman to give herself to me, but I would do everything I could to keep her, and my future children safe. An official marriage would not be possible, but she could receive a bodyguard and tech priest expertise to raise her world to the peak of productivity and civilization. Even simply repairing the underhive conduits and algae farms would allow the world to double its population in a few decades, while cleansing the gangs and opening new weapons factories would provide increased exports and profit. The nearby Forge world Akatrin was asked to help set up shipyards for system corvettes and mining spaceships, as well as manufactoriums for armed sentinels and tarantula turrets. My own tech priests from Retribution would train and consecrate 1 million new tech priests here, to produce weasels and interceptor fighters, and just like that, Meridian would soon be able to export mechanized regiments wherever they were needed. Nothing too high-tech, but thousands of Imperial Guard regiments armed with light tanks and walkers were much better than simple infantry regiments with puny lasguns and bayonets. You go and help Inquisitor Adrastia, my love. Make sure you take the Death Watch and the Silent Sisters. I sent to my dear Rose, who was lounging in my armchair and enjoying the show. Damn horny lover. You had 6 women today. Rose grumbled as she grabbed her staff and vanished in a flash of purple light. I shrugged inward and continued my fucking job. On the outskirts of the system, my cruisers armed with Nova cannons were already skirmishing with the first bioships, cutting of a small hive tendril heading towards Typhon_Primaris, and testing the new weapons. With increased range and power, the long lances on the cruisers allowed the ships to engage and harass the Tyranids without much danger, 100 Lamenter and Lancefire cruisers easily terminating 1,000 bioships in a single day. After my dear governor crashed on top of me exhausted, my spear sprang back, ready to fight again. Is it my turn now? Sister Alana asked in a hungry voice, trying to sound sultry, but failing so cutely. I sent Elena back to her own bed to rest, and waved Alana closer. Your turn for what, my dear? I asked teasingly. You mean Astartes? Always teasing me, even when I'm on bodyguard duty. The vocal silent sister grumbled as she took off her armor and jumped in my bed, to guard my body closely. Raven passed a throne coin to Ludvius, no doubt paying some secret debt among them, making the veteran grin at me and hold his thumb up. I've bet a throne you'll reach 7 women one day, Captain. Took you a couple of years, but you finally managed. The powerful war machine explained over the manifold connection. Well, I guess they would get bored watching me bang women over so many decades. One of you will need to remain on Meridian for a couple of decades. Guard my children until they grow up and gain power over the hive world. I sent as a reply, while I pampered sweet Alana with kisses. Ludvius nodded slowly. It would be my honor, Captain. Perhaps you'll reach 8 women by then. I sighed inward, sad to part with him. But 2 Blood Angel bodyguards were rather wasted on me now, and the presence of Ludvius would entrench Elena as a planetary governor even in front of other Astartes or tech priests or Ministorum adepts. While Alana enjoyed bodyguarding me, I kept watch on my Rose and the swift and brutal manner in which she and Lady Adrastia confronted the corrupted chapter master and executed him. From there, the purging spread among corrupted Blood Raven librarians and chaplains, and then to their connections among House Vandis of the former governor. A noble house was a large entity, comparable to a national government on Earth. Purging and rounding up the traitors took an entire week, even with the aid of the local Adeptus Arbits, the Inquisition's own troops and a company of lamented Terminators backed by 50 lamented Tech Marines to provide perimeter security with their mobile Guardian turrets. It would have been my right to confiscate some of the loot, but I did not even relics and Astartes armor. Instead, I demanded 100 ampoules of Blood Raven gene seed for my own librarians, and denied their chapter further involvement on Meridian. The new chapter master was not too happy, but he relented in the end. I feel we got played by you and the Inquisition, Master Lancefire. You should have let us deal with the traitors ourselves. The grisly old veteran muttered with a cold voice. I just learned from my mistakes, Master Angelos. As did you, I suppose. I heard you released a greater demon with that big hammer of yours. Smashing things is not always the better option. I commented wryly, as this idiot did indeed release a demon by crushing the maledictum artifact. Do not try to shame me, Lord Lancefire. And 100 gene seeds is too much, as we're too recovering from losing so many battle brothers and librarians. Gabriel Angelos exclaimed, a bit outraged. I nodded in agreement. What I can offer is 100 blank recruits in a decade. Also blank ship captains for your spaceships. At least with them, you'll be certain they will never fall to chaos. The Blood Raven glanced behind me, where my sons were arrayed in powerful Terminator armors, immune to chaos and most mortal weapons. Why a decade? He asked, curious. Blanks are few and they need to produce offspring of their own, before being sent to die as Astartes. I answered with a shrug and walked away. In my rooms, I found Rose and Adrastia discussing the topic of the day, me. I'd have thought you'll be eager to leave my presence, Lady Adrastia, I murmured as I began taking off my power armor. The pretty Inquisitor smiled coyly and unbuttoned her own leather uniform, showing off a boob window under the leather jacket. I blinked and checked with Rose. Turns out Lady Adrastia wants a blank daughter too, my lover explained with a smirk. I jumped in my bed and checked the new conquest, as Adrastia peeled off the black leathers of her job. "You can leave your hat on," I demanded on a whim. It was a quote from the classics, after all.